Well, all right, welcome. Glad you're here. We have covered a lot of ground, a lot of territory in just 3 weeks. For some of you, it's been eye-opening, and if nothing else, you've learned one fundamental, life-changing truth, and that's this. Living well with a woman doesn't just happen. It's an acquired skill. There's an excellent book by Philip McGraw called Life Strategies. Now, most of us know Philip McGraw as Dr. Phil, and he's made millions of dollars saying basically the same thing as the Apostle Peter in the first century and the things he said about life and relationships. I want you to take a look at this quote from his book, and you'll see what I mean. He says this: "There is a difference between really living and just existing. Existing is instinctual. It is involuntary, reactive, self-preserving, with the primary goal of just getting from one day to the next without regard to quality." Now, that's how a lot of men live with their wives, okay? That's how a lot of men date their girlfriends, just instinctual, just existing. On the other hand, he says this. He says, living is the exercise of certain learned skills and attitudes and abilities that you have acquired and honed. Now, guys, do you know what that is? That is a 21st century way of speaking the first century wisdom of the Apostle Peter. It ought to be burned into your brain by now. We've talked about it so much. He says, husbands, live. Don't just exist with your wives, but live with your wives in an understanding way, with certain acquired skills and attitudes and abilities. Now, Peter said it first in the first century. Dr. Phil just elaborated on it and marketed it well. Over the last 3 weeks, we've looked at some of those acquired skills. We've talked about the needs of a woman. We've had the opportunity to open our eyes to the fact that the needs of a woman are different from the needs of a man. And we've looked at her top 4 needs, and we've discovered they involve affection and security and significance and a thing we call conversational companionship. And if you had the courage to do the application project with your wife, you discovered what her number 1 need is. We also learned about the different personalities, and maybe you finally discovered that you live with somebody whose slant on life is going to be forever different from yours because they're a powerful choleric or a peaceful phlegmatic or a perfect melancholy or a popular sanguine, and they're different from you. And the big eye-opener for many of us, I know it was for me when I discovered this, the big eye-opener is they will always be different. Their personality is going to stay with them for the rest of their life. Now, you've had the opportunity to discover the different love languages that we use to speak to one another, and there's a specific love language that each of us particularly desire from another person. And here's the thing, guys. You can spend your whole life speaking 4 of the 5 love languages to your mate, and you can miss it. And her tank will always be on empty because she's missing the number 1 love language that she so desperately needs from you. Now, that's a lot of ground to cover in just 3 weeks. And all of this understanding knowledge is what works with a woman, but here's the thing, all right? To put what works with a woman to work is an entirely different matter. I said last week, I said, some of us are just too smart for our own good. We've got the information, we've got the knowledge, we've checked off the boxes, but we're just not men of action. We've not applied it. So to put it to work is what is key, and just knowing it is not enough. It requires something different. We learned it in session 1. You know what it is? The paradox principle. And that is what? 3 words. What are they? Die to live. That's the paradox principle. Die to live. That is the ultimate wisdom in life. If you're going to acquire the best in life, it's always going to go against your natural instincts. If I want the best in life, I have to die a little to get it. That's life's universal success principle. Listen, any man, anywhere, who is successful in any endeavor, now that's universal, isn't it? He has learned in some way or another this paradox principle, that I have to die to something in me first if I'm going to really live in something later. Now, that's absolutely true when it comes to living with a woman. If I want to be successful with her, I have to learn to do the unnatural. I've got to learn to do the unselfish, the non-instinctive. Sometimes the hard, sometimes I've got to learn to do the fearful. Not all the time. In fact, sometimes it's just a few moments in time. I'm not going to have to do this all the time, but here's the key. I'm going to have to do it at the right times. I'm going to have to identify the right times and die to live. And with each of these little deaths, I get a huge surprise. I benefit from the paradox principle. Because in dying just a little, I learn to love better and live better. And I learn how to live with my wife in an understanding way. The paradox principle, as it relates to a woman, is just as you see it. Die little and live a lot. Now, if you refuse to die a little, gentlemen, you will die a lot. Die a little, live a lot. The authentic man embraces that as his way of life. Now, that's the ground we've covered over the past few weeks. Now, here's what we want to do today, okay? We want to discover how a man stays close to the woman he loves. Guys, I want to give you enough stuff today so you won't have to be singing. You've lost that loving feeling, okay? Some of you can't sing anyway, and it'd just be really, really, painful. But I want to set you up for success so you can learn what it means to really experience a deep sense of happiness with a woman. I believe that happiness with a woman is directly proportional to how close you can stay to that woman so you can feel and love and laugh and enjoy life together. So, to get started, I want to address three forces that are constantly trying to separate you from the woman you love. These are three forces that are like wedges that come in between your relationship, and if not addressed over time, they're going to slowly push you apart and keep you from the very thing that you so desperately desire. So, on your outline, here's the first one. Let's call it everyday conflict. Everyday conflict. Now, I'm talking about fights, little angry disagreements, misunderstandings, and they sometimes will evolve into what I want to call culture wars. Culture wars. That's where you're trying to get your culture to be adopted by her. And you hope that she will give up her culture and join your country with your values and your taste. But gentlemen, it will never happen. It will never happen. You never really dominate anyone. Not really. Even when you think you've done it, on the inside, they're still resisting. And worst of all, even when they just give in, you may have won the battle, but you've lost the war because you don't feel close. Everyday conflict. Here's the reality. Write this down. Every relationship is going to experience conflict. Every relationship. That's because two people are more than just male and female. Their backgrounds are different. Their life experiences are different. And all of those differences create in each person this unique set of expectations and values and perspectives, and they carry that into the relationship. When you first enter into that relationship, many of those values and expectations kind of stay hidden just beneath the waterline of the relationship. They're there. And until later on, they just suddenly come out of the water, some circumstance, and they just rear their head, kind of like Jaws, all right? Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, just when you thought you were safe in the relationship, something's going to happen, and one day your mate turns to you and says something like this. When are you going to pick up after yourself? And you hear, or she says, why did you buy that without asking me? And you hear, that's how life works. You're kind of cruising along, everything looks good, and then all of a sudden, there it is. It rears its ugly head. Now, our differences make conflict inevitable. She grew up where money was made to be spent. You grew up where money was made to be saved. She grew up where there was a place for everything. You grew up where everything's got its place. She grew up with expensive taste, always buy the best. Labels really count. You grew up with sales taste, just buy the cheapest. You don't care what the label is. She grew up charging it. You grew up paying with cash. She grew up a hugger. You grew up a handshaker. She grew up always late, and you grew up always on time. She grew up in a church background where people raised their hands and they shouted. You grew up where you went to church, nobody touched anybody. You just sat there quiet and you hoped you got out alive. She grew up expecting the extended family to all gather together at mother's house for Christmas. You grew up expecting to always spend Christmas at your house alone. Now, gentlemen, all of those differences create conflict. So the question is not, will there be conflict? Here's the question. Write it down. How do I deal with the conflict? You're going to have it. So how are you going to deal with it? After a big fight with his wife, there was a man talking to his buddies later about it, and he said, well, as usual, after this fight, she came crawling to me on her hands and knees. Well, across town, his wife was talking to her girlfriends, and she was talking about the same fight. She said, well, as usual, I came crawling to him on my hands and knees. Then I said, Jim, get out from under that bed and talk to me like a man. So how are you going to handle the conflict? Most couples don't handle conflict well for one reason. And here it is, guys. They've got the wrong goal in mind. Let's just call it the natural goal. Okay? The natural goal. And that goal is this. When you have a fight, your first thought is to win. That's your thought. To win. That's your natural thought. Not to understand. You want to win. And so the assumption behind your strategy is this. I'm right. Why don't they understand that? And then you spend hours or sometimes weeks, in some cases months, trying to hammer the other person and to get them to understand that you were right. And in doing that, you know what happens? We just drive each other further and further apart. I want to give you another quote from Dr. Phil, okay? And this is a wise statement because it comes from his experiences as a therapist counseling thousands of couples about conflict. Here's what he says. He says, in all the years that I've worked with couples, the most common goal of each person was not to find out how to live and behave properly. Now, guys, that's an amazing statement. Their goal was not to find out how to live and behave properly, but to convince me, the therapist, that what they were believing or doing was correct. Seldom did either partner come to me and sincerely say, I want our marriage to work, no matter who is right. What both of them usually said was, I want you to recognize that I'm right and convince my spouse that I'm right so that we can do things, how? My way. Now, guys, in almost 30 years as a pastor, I haven't counseled nearly as many people as Dr. Phil, but I will tell you, that's been my experience with people too. I found that for most people in conflict, it's much more important for them to be right than it is for them to work it out right. Well, guys, we're here in this room to do better than that. And I just want to congratulate you for sticking with me so far, okay? Our journey is a journey into authentic manhood, not pseudo-manhood that only feels good when you win. I want to use the diagram in your outline to show you how conflict can actually work for you rather than against you. Now, all conflicts are really alike. Some may be small, some large, some short, some lengthy, but all of them look like that diagram, okay? Here's how it starts. It starts right in the center with the conflict itself. Now, you can put any conflict you want in there, but right after it happens, the first thing that happens to you is this. You have hurt feelings. And then watch this. After those hurt feelings, you move to anger. And then that anger moves you to the first of two critical moments. Immediately, you have two choices for yourself. Now, the first choice is the wrong one. It's the natural choice. Now, men, by the way, typically make this choice a lot, okay? They're hurt, now they're angry, and And their first choice in this critical turn of the circle is to flee, to withdraw, to punish the other person with silence. So everybody knows they're hurt. You walk around, you don't say anything. You just bottle it up. Kick the cat, you know. Your wife asks you for something. You just mumble. And you're just trying to punish them through silence. Now, for a while, it might feel like you're scoring some points for your side, but guys, if you really think it through, it's just the opposite of closeness. Because when you flee in a moment like that, here's what happens. All it does is escalate the isolation. It escalates isolation. Now, I've got to confess something, guys. I'm good at that. How about you? That's me. That's my MO. I'm good at holding out, and it just sours everything. One guy did that to his wife for a month. Finally, she got so tired of the quiet, you know, that eerie silence. She finally said to him, she said, "I can't take this anymore." And he said, "Well, what do you propose we do about it?" She said, "Well, why don't we just get down on our knees right now and ask God to take one of us?" And he said, "What then?" She said, "Well, then I'll go live with my sister in Detroit." That you can choose the path of withdrawal because men are naturally good at that, or you can make the better decision. Here it is. Write this down. You can choose to face the conflict, and the quicker the better. In this moment of choosing to face the conflict, immediately you're going to encounter the second of those two very critical decisions, okay? There are two paths at this point. You've chosen to face the conflict, but you can make a wrong choice, and you can face it incorrectly. Here's what you can do. You can choose to fight, and your goal is to fight to win. So, go back to your wife or your girlfriend, and you say, "We're going to talk about this." But then in talking about it, what you do is accuse her and make demands and put her down and denigrate. Because the goal is to get her to admit that she was what? Wrong. Your goal is fighting to win. That's the wrong choice. All that does is escalate the conflict. All right? That's like pouring gasoline on a fire, okay? What started as just a little fight now becomes a full-scale war. And both of those decisions are wrong decisions, to flee or to fight. They're kind of exit ramps of self-preservation. You know, they're really like death spirals. You just keep spiraling downward. And believe it or not, guys, believe it or not, conflict is supposed to work for you. It's supposed to work for you, but when we take these exit ramps, it works against us. Now, there is a better choice. And the choice is I can step back and I can recognize the goal is not to win, and I can move into this and face it in a different way. And here's how you do that. To move into it with dialogue. And it always starts this way. Hey, we need to talk. Let's talk. And if you're doing it correctly, then you're inviting the other person, this is important, you're inviting them into a dialogue, not a monologue. And certainly not a diatribe, okay? You're engaging them in dialogue. So you can talk with each other because you're in this to solve the problem, not to win the battle. And out of that comes understanding. And out of that comes forgiveness. And out of that comes compromise. And guys, those are all very good things. Now, if I make the circle, and if I get to that point, then immediately two things happen that work for me. The first thing is this: conflict is resolved. And the second thing is this: we grow closer together. The relationship grows. Now remember, we come from two different cultures, but in this one little conflict, we will understand each other a little better. And our values will become closer together. And we feel a deeper sense of oneness. And guys, listen, over time, as a couple completes that circle again and again and again in 100 different areas. When they get to be 30 and 40 and 50 years old, that's how your love relationship turns golden. Now, that's an important diagram to remember, okay? That is the anatomy of a conflict. And here's the principle, okay? Conflict, write this down. Conflict can either grow you as a couple closer together, or it can force you further apart. You can flee and you can fight to win. Or you can make the circle, which really is a circle of life for a relationship. And it really can be a circle of life for you if you learn how to do it. I want to give you a key insight. A key insight. Here it is. It's the wise couple who learns how to resolve conflict quickly and correctly. And the diagram that you have is the way to do it correctly. You guys want to go out and get tattoos, have that diagram tattooed on you? That's the way to do it correctly. I want to give you the words of another apostle, a first century apostle. Here's how the apostle Paul says you should deal with anger and conflict. In Ephesians chapter 4:26, he says this. He says, "Do not let the sun go down on your anger." Now, earlier in the text, he said this. Now, look, you can be angry. Okay, you can't avoid it. It's not a thing to be avoided. Conflict is inevitable. But when it comes, Paul says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. There's one guy who had a fight with his wife, and she wanted to handle it correctly and engage him in dialogue. But he decided to take the natural way and flee. So he said, I'm going to go for a jog. Y'all ever done stuff like this? You know, I got to go jog. Yeah, like you never jogged a day in your life. When he came back, she was waiting for him, okay? And she's hoping he'd talk, but he just was kind of hardened in the jog. And so he walked right past her, didn't say a word. He went to take a shower. On the bathroom door was a sticky note. Had a little happy face on it. Underneath it were the words, "Let's talk." And he's thinking, what's there to talk about? She's wrong, I'm right. Talking won't get us anywhere. So he just grabbed the note and threw it away. Walked in the bathroom, and on the mirror there was another sticky note. This one had a happy face on it. Underneath it was the word, "Please." He wavered just a little bit. But then he pulled it off the mirror, threw it in the trash. And he opens the shower door, and on the shower nozzle was a third sticky note. This time it had a sad face with a mouth turned down. Also had a little picture of a sun going down. And it said, "You'll be sorry." He asked her later, "How'd you know it was going to take 3 notes?" She said, "I've been around you a lot, long enough." Let me say it again, okay? It's the wise couple who resolves conflict quickly and correctly and who uses it to grow together rather than being pushed apart. Understand the anatomy of a conflict. The guy who learns to die to live in conflict, remember those 2 critical moments? He's got 2 choices. Okay, you had the fight, you got your feelings hurt. Okay, those are 2 critical die to live moments. Am I going to flee or am I going to face it? Am I going to die to live? And it's not going to feel natural. It's never going to feel natural. It's going to be counter to what you feel naturally, to what you feel instinctively. But then you go to the next critical moment. Am I going to fight to win, or am I going to die to live? And if I choose to die to live, then I'm going to say, let's talk. And I'm going to seek to resolve rather than to win. And I died a little, but now I'm going to live a whole lot better. I want us to look at a second enemy of staying close. I want to call it creeping separateness. Creeping separateness. Sheldon Van Auken describes this enemy probably better than anyone. And he writes these words. He says, "The killer of love is creeping separateness. In-loveness is a gift, but then it's up to the lovers to cherish it or to ruin it. Taking love for granted, especially after marriage. Ceasing to do things together. Finding separate interest. We turning into I. Self-regard. What I want to do. Actual selfishness is only a hop away. This is the way of creeping separateness. And in the modern world, everything favors it. The man going off to his office, the woman staying home with the children, her children, or perhaps having a different job. The failure of love, listen, might seem to be caused by hate or boredom or unfaithfulness with a lover, but listen, those are only the results. First came the creeping separateness, the failure behind the failure. It wasn't another woman that caused it to fail. This is the failure behind the failure. And that's a powerful statement. It might look like this. A couple has their second child. And what little time they had for each other after having their first child and working jobs disappeared. Suddenly, it wasn't natural to get together anymore. Guys, it's not natural. You have to fight for it. The wife struggles with the kids during the day and a newborn during the night. The husband's working his first job. He's working really hard, probably too hard. But not so hard that he would give up playing after work. He still got together with his buddies and played basketball. Still worked out at the club. Still found time to go out at night even though his wife couldn't go. That's the creeping separateness. And that goes on for a while, and they begin to move apart. Feelings of love begin to fade. And then one day, he feels this incredible attraction to another woman. Not just a little lust. This is a dark, magnetic pull. Now, how could this happen? It's because this couple made the mistake. This couple made the mistake that their love could stand the test of neglect. They made that mistake. That's what I mean by creeping separateness. It's a silent killer. And what a man needs to ask his woman and himself continually is this. This would be a good exercise for you to do this week. It's not an assignment, just a strong suggestion. Ask the question to your wife or to your girlfriend, do you feel close to me? Ask yourself, do I feel close to you? And if either party can't answer that with a convincing yes, it means that some serious interaction needs to take place. And even better than asking those questions, I want to give you some smart moves that a man can make to guarantee closeness. Okay, let me give you two of them. Here's the first one, smart moves. You need to commit to a winning strategy. Now, what is the winning strategy? I'll give you three things. Number one, weekly escapes. Weekly escapes. These can become your communication connectors. Now, these escapes are not being with friends. They're not being with the kids. It's not being in an activity. It's you and your wife or your girlfriend being alone. And guys, it has to be weekly so you can catch up and process life together. I'm not talking about spending a lot of money. I'm talking about something even more than, I'm not talking about dinner and a movie, okay? I'm talking about time that you converse with her and you communicate. And you meet the conversational needs of that woman. But you also meet a great need that you have, and that is to build into your wife correctly and to love her in a way that changes her life. The second part of the strategy is monthly experiences, and these can become your companionship keepers. It's common sense kind of stuff. You know, as I tell you this, you're thinking, well, that just sounds, that's logical, but sometimes we miss the obvious. Stuff like going for a walk together, going to a concert together, going to a football game together, working in the yard together, shopping together, having friends over together, or weekend getaways together. Now, do y'all hear a common word in all of that? Together. Together. The goal is doing life together. Because of creeping separateness, here's what happens. You get into a fast-paced job with friends and your own personal recreations. She gets into her job and the kids, and all of a sudden it becomes her kids, her clubs, her activities. And listen, the only time you ever really connect is at a kids' event. That's the only time. It's the only thing you have in common is your kids and your kids' events. And then watch. Then the kids leave. And suddenly you're married to a stranger. Mark it down. The couple that plays together stays together. And if you sacrifice it, you're setting yourself up in the most important relationship of your life for failure. The third part of the strategy is yearly extravaganzas. Now, these can become your shared memory makers, okay, making great memories together, maybe just once a year. but it gives a lifetime of positive energy to the relationship. Make a great memory with your wife, and that memory will come back and replay itself over and over again in your relationship. And they keep pouring energy into your relationship. They bring you close. We remember, my wife and I remember sailing on a sailboat under the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. That was a great memory. I remember teaching her how to ski. I remember teaching her how to snorkel in Grand Cayman. The best vacation of our life, the most restful, relaxing. Every day we slept late, crawled out to the beach, ordered lunch on the beach, snorkeled, and went back in and repeated it, the next day and the next. Great memory. We still talk about that. I remember the Colorado Rockies and at the Broadmoor at Colorado Springs. Yeah, these things cost a little bit of money, but you plan for them. Or they don't have to cost a lot. You just be creative. And you make memories. And you see a commercial of Colorado or San Francisco, and you think, been there, done that. Memory makers, yearly extravaganzas. Wise is the man who'll do these kinds of things. You need to commit to that strategy. Now, here's the thing. Don't just commit to it. Here's the second major thing. Write this down. Will you commit to be the one who initiates this strategy? You be the one to initiate it, okay? That could be one of your 10 key moves, okay? Those of you who have been with us since session 1, remember the 10 key moves sheet from session 1? This could be a good time for you to say, there's one. I need to make a lifetime memory. Or maybe you want to say, I need to start dating my wife, or I need to have a weekly, some kind of connection, a conversational moment. That's how you combat creeping separateness. Now, let me give you one more creepy thing I want to mention to you, okay? Let's call it creeping resentment. Creeping resentment. The Bible has some wisdom for us about this. According to the Bible, men in particular are in danger of falling into resentment. It doesn't ever say this to the woman in the Bible, just to men. It warns us about resentment. Here it is in Colossians 3:19. It says, "Husbands, do not become embittered." Another word would be resentful against your wives. Now, I wonder why God felt it necessary to tell us, men, to not be resentful or bitter against our wives. The Bible doesn't answer it, so we can just speculate. But maybe it's because men, if we're honest, sometimes we're just more demanding in relationships. And we're prone to resentment. That's the way I am sometimes. I can get impatient with my wife. And here's the thing, I can bottle things up, and I can get bitter and resentful. That is the natural tendency for me as a man, and it's called creeping resentment. If it builds up, the closeness will die. Now, every man needs to ask this question: what growing resentment, if any, and maybe there's not any, what growing resentment am I carrying towards my wife or my girlfriend right now? Did you know that research tells us that of all the human emotions, resentment and bitterness are the most powerful and the most destructive? Listen, even if it's justified, not dealing with it will change you. And it makes you, whether you're aware of it or not, it makes you an unhealthy person. And it begins to poison everything in a relationship and everything about you. Resentment is a cancer to closeness. Here's some smart moves you can make to protect yourself from this enemy. First, right now, if you're in a relationship with a woman, you need to look inside yourself. Just kind of, check your temperature towards her, okay? If something's kind of coming to the surface, kind of bubbling up as we're talking, and your temperature gauge is running hot, then there's an issue, and you need to take note of it, okay? Could be how she handles the money. Is there something that she's not doing? Is she not attending to your needs? Is it maybe she's unorganized and sloppy? For those of you who are married, is she not sexually responsive enough? But the thing is, you don't have the courage to talk to her, so you just bottle it up and you just are running on hot. Check your temperature, because pressure is building. Secondly, a smart move is to write your resentment down in an I statement. Now, guys, this is going to sound a little bit like psychobabble, but it's great relationship skills. If you're going to talk about it, you need to know how to talk about it. And whatever you're feeling hot about, you need to put it into an I statement, okay? That's going to help you open dialogue. All right, for instance, instead of saying something like, look at this Visa bill. You're a financial first grader. Are you trying to send us into bankruptcy? That's one way to start. Or you can sit down in a calmer moment, and you can write it out into an I statement. You can say, honey, we need to talk about something. I am very uncomfortable about where our money's going. Can we figure this out together? That's the better way. Or you can say something like, you don't care about me. All you care about is the kids. I'm working my rear off. I had to choose the right word. I'm working my rear off. And I don't get anything. That's one way to start. You can say in a calmer moment, you know, honey, I need your support. I'm feeling kind of alone out there. I need you. That's what I mean. It's an important step in the smart moves. Write your resentment in an I statement. Next, once you've got it, the next move is to communicate it. That's the third step, okay? Discuss it in a safe place. I suggest any place other than the food court at the mall, okay? You know what I'm saying. A safe place where you got time to talk. You're not rushed. She's got your full attention. And remember, what you're seeking is not to win. You're seeking to get close, all right? Remember, you're smart. You're an authentic man now, okay? And then the next move is this. Seek a resolution that both of you can live with. Really, guys, just like in politics, believe it or not, marriage sometimes is the art of compromise, okay? 9 times out of 10, for those objective observers, that's the right place to be. One thing is certain, halfway is better than no way, isn't it? Halfway is better than no way. Now, what if you can't agree on a resolution? In a few cases, you can't. If you can't work it out by yourselves, here's the last thing. You need to seek mutually agreed upon outside help. And guys, you need to do it immediately because resentment is just that dangerous. See, you're the man. So you look into her eyes and you say, I love you too much to let this thing keep growing in me. And I'm going to do whatever's necessary. I'm going to help us by bringing whoever is necessary into this to help us stay close for the rest of our life. All right, guys, there you have it. I hope I've armed you with enough so you won't have to sing, you've lost that loving feeling, okay? 3 forces that drive that loving feeling out of us for one another. 3 ways to combat the enemies of closeness. Now, here's what I want you to know as we close, okay? For these principles to work for you, you know what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to die a little. You're going to have to die a little. But it's going to be worth it because it's going to give back to you a life that's sweeter and more fulfilling and more satisfying. It's going to take you to a deeper level of happiness with a woman that you love. Now, next week, we're going to talk about a man's favorite subject and his number one recreation, what's on our minds most of the time, and that is global warming. No, we're going to talk about sex, okay? You don't want to miss that one, okay? I'll see you next week.